creativity is a form of self-expression. Creativity is inherently therapeutic because to create is to tap into source energy. Hello, what's up? Welcome back to another episode. My name is Kitty Knorr and this is Being Human is Trippy. Part of me starting this podcast was so that I had kind of free reign to talk about whatever I wanted to talk about. And what I'm into is creativity, spirituality, astrology, philosophy. Recently, I've been redefining what spirituality means to me, and that might be obvious because I've talked about it on the last 2 episodes. However, I had a little breakthrough moment a week ago now, a little bit over a week ago, that really has helped me make sense of why I do the things that I do. And the breakthrough was about spirituality and creativity and how connected those 2 things are, or at least, in my opinion, how connected they are. And I had the breakthrough while I was thinking about Pisces energy. So in astrology, Pisces is the very last sign. It is the 12th sign of the zodiac, and it also rules the 12th house, which is just a section of the sky on a birth chart. And every single sign is synonymous with certain esoteric meanings, archetypes, and symbolism. And Pisces is synonymous with psychic abilities, like dreams, past lives, the subconscious, but also art and creativity. So while I was in deep contemplation about Pisces energy and the fact that there is a relationship between psychic abilities, the subconscious, and art, I was just thinking about it, and one day it just it hit me. Creative energy is spiritual energy. It just is. And I would argue that it's because whether or not you believe in a single God, whether or not you believe in multiple gods, whatever force, whatever energy created this universe and set everything into motion, it was a creative energy, or maybe it was multiple creative energies. Birth is the transmutation of energy into physical matter. And if you believe in reincarnation, death is the process of physical matter returning back to that energetic state. I think creativity works in the same way. When we have an idea, it is energy. And when we make that idea manifest and we write or we paint, we create, we build, we are literally bringing that idea to life. We are making energy into matter. And so creative energy is spiritual energy, because every time we create, we are presented an opportunity to tap into the same life force, the same life-giving energy that created the cosmos, that started a chain of events. And when artists tap into flow states, it feels transcendental because it is. When you are making something and you lose yourself in it, or you lose track of time, you're lost in the sauce, that is extremely meditative and it's magical, because what you're doing in that moment is alchemy. You are making the unseen seen. You are making what is only visible in your mind visible to the masses, to everybody. You are literally birthing something into existence. And for this reason, creativity is extremely therapeutic, extremely cathartic, And every single human being in existence is creative. And while I like to believe in schools of thought like panpsychism, I think that's what it's called, the idea that everything is conscious. Everything. Like a mushroom has consciousness, a cow has consciousness, I have consciousness. Everything. While I like to believe in that kind of thinking, the problem is humans will always be at the top of that hierarchy, understanding ourselves to have more consciousness than the cow, than the mushroom. And the problem is we created the concept, we created the hierarchy, of course we're gonna put ourselves on top of it. How are we supposed to measure consciousness? However, there is something in us that is driven to build, to create. A cow doesn't have the same drive to create. Maybe if they had the opposable thumbs, they would. I don't know. I say all of this to argue that there is a creative component to being human, that we are all inherently creative beings. And it's only through social conditioning that we have come to understand creativity through a very limited, narrow lens. Creativity isn't just coloring books and colored pencils and painting and pottery. Creative thinking is just that. It is a mode of thought. And it's the way we think. We think creatively. That's how we're wired. Creative expression is self-expression. As humans, we each possess an innate urge to want to share, to want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to feel fully expressed. And when we don't have healthy creative outlets of letting ourselves be seen and heard, we tend to look for attention in extremely unhealthy ways. And I think if everyone tended to their creative side, if everyone was forced to realize that they have a creative side, we would all be a lot happier and we'd all have therapeutic hobbies. And I think the world would be a better place. But it's not our fault that we have so many creative hang-ups and that we don't see ourselves as inherently creatively inclined. It's primarily because, at least in recent years, the American education system just wants to crank out an American labor force. Art classes, music classes are not priority because when schools undergo budget cuts, those kind of programs are the first to go. And forget about it, in underprivileged areas, there's school systems that don't even have art classes. That's a privilege, it's a luxury. And even more so, art isn't taken seriously in our society. It's not. We're taught that it's okay to daydream as kids, but then when we grow up, it's time to get a little practical. It's time to get a little logical. And to be practical and to be logical is to maintain the status quo. Practicality kills creativity. We live in a society that is very creatively repressed, and we are also very sexually repressed. And I think that ties in nicely together because creative energy is sexual energy. If creative energy is spiritual source energy, well, what does source energy do? It gives birth to life. And so in that way, we can understand creativity not only by means of reproduction, right? Very heteronormative idea of a man impregnates a woman and then the woman gestates for 9 months and then she pops out a kid. That's the miracle of life. But Creative energy is sexual energy, not only because of reproduction, but also creative energy is sexual energy because to create and to share yourself and to share your ideas is a very vulnerable process. To have sex with someone is a very vulnerable process. Creativity is a form of self-expression. Creativity is inherently therapeutic because to create is to tap into source energy. It's an extremely magical process that we tend to take for granted. And I think because of capitalism and just like because of labor production in general, we tend to fixate on the final product of the thing we create. We tend to fixate on like, oh, yes, this thing is done. Now I'm going to put it out in the world and I'm going to pay attention to the analytics and I want it to perform well. And maybe the algorithm that I'm putting it in even like affected the thing that I make. And because of capitalism and our current understanding of how the world works, which is a very rigid, patriarchal, linear thing, we are taught how to be consumers. We're not taught how to be creators. We're not taught to believe in ourselves and value our ideas and trust the process. We are taught to seek external ways of feeling good, of confirmation and validation. And to reclaim your creativity it's very powerful and it can be very helpful to your mental well-being. If you don't consider yourself an artist, I think it can be extremely therapeutic and helpful for your mental well-being to like create for yourself, to have a little creative practice just because it makes you feel good, whether you like to write or you like to paint, whatever floats your boat. I think there's power in just doing things because they feel good. We're not taught how to prioritize pleasure, and I think a creative practice can be extremely pleasurable. However, if you are a creative person, operating under capitalism can be a little tricky because we are taught to hyperfixate on the finished product. We are taught to pay attention to the algorithm, to analytics, to put a lot of pressure on how our thing performs in the real world. And while I do think that it's cool, and I do wholeheartedly believe that there has never been an easier time to make a living as an artist because of the internet and because of the ability to share whatever you make. However, when we are solely focused on how our product performs, on how our art performs, on how our YouTube channel performs, it sucks the fun out of our process. When we focus too much on numbers, it kills our creativity. When we want to please an audience, it kills our creativity. If you are a creator that does tend to focus too much on how well your content performs, I encourage you to shift your focus instead to actually really enjoying the creative process for what it is. Reconnect with that sacredness, that oneness that comes out of a flow state. Reconnect with why you started making things in the first place. And you probably started making things because it felt good, because it was fun, because it brought you joy, because it was a place for you to feel a catharsis and communicate what you were going through, whether you were going through good things or bad things. I do think that the tormented artist stereotype exists for a reason, and it's because we can get sucked into this belief that we need to suffer for our art, because sometimes pain does make really good inspiration. Some really good sad love songs. But I'm gonna argue that you do not need to suffer for your art. You do not. You do not. If you are a person who makes a living from your craft, or if you're a person who wants to make a living from your craft, you do need to be extremely disciplined. And instead of chasing a high all the time, you need to accept the creative process for what it is and spend your entire life figuring out what that means to you. Yeah, that, my friends, is pretty much it. I want to thank you so much for watching this, for listening to this. Let me know how this message lands with you. Does it make sense to you? Do you feel differently? Yeah. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you next week. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.